And we are recording, and I'm very happy to introduce Linda Harvey, who is the executive director of one of my favorite places of all time, and I've lived all over the world, Hammond Castle. Linda, welcome to MSO.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Thanks for interviewing me.
How long have you been at Hammond Castle?
I've been here almost coming on my second anniversary. So it was an opportunity that I couldn't resist, and the castle needed a little refreshing, a little pick-me-up, and hopefully we're on the right track doing that.
This is a very unique place, and I know most everybody on the North Shore knows of Hammond Castle, but some might. How did you get involved with Hammond Castle? What attracted you to it, or how did you first learn about it?
Well, actually, having lived on the North Shore for the past 30 years, it's been something that we've been involved with, my husband and I, for years. And bringing the children here when they were younger, and just being very active within the castle itself. It's just a wonderful place to be, and it has it's such rich texture to offer to the community that I've always been a fan. So when the opportunity came to come here and work, I just was thrilled to take on the job.
Cool. Before we get to the October and fall presentations or availabilities of Hammond, let's talk a little bit about John Hayes Hammond Jr. and the Hammond Castle. It's located in a spectacular part of the Gloucester waterfront. And I didn't realize or know that John Hayes Hammond Sr. owned at one time most of the property from where the castle is in Magnolia all the way back around toward Gloucester on, I think it's Cressy's Beach, which is an enormous amount of real estate. So what's a little bit of the history of John Hayes Hammond Jr. that you could send along to us?
Sure. Well, John Jr., known as Jack, was always intrigued with this area. His family came here as a summer resident, actually, and he grew up doing a lot of work in or schooling in Europe, where he grew to love castles and cathedrals and loved history and Renaissance. So he always had a dream of building his own castle, and when his father told him it was time that he needed to find his own home, he came down the road a bit from his father's home and purchased 7 acres of land here on the waterfront and started building the castle. It was built between 1926 and 1929, using all local stone and carpenters and craftsmen, stonemasons from the area. So he just kind of brought the entire community into the building of this building. But he also brought over artifacts from Europe. And he went there in search of archways and art and all sorts of things that he could embed into the walls of the museum as he was building them. It was his dream to create a cathedral, a medieval 13th century cathedral. And he did that in our Great Hall. And then he continued on with that theme of into our courtyard, which is a replica of a 15th century French village. And he brought in the building facades and installed them, created a beautiful pool area, which was designed after Elizabeth Stewart Gardner and pools. He loved her place in Boston, and he just wanted to bring that element into the castle itself. And there's a bit of a Greek and Roman theme to it as well, with the Roman columns. And it's just a beautiful room. It was weather controlled at one time. It has a glass ceiling, which actually we're replacing this year with the help of grants from CPA and the Mass Cultural Council. So we're doing some renovations on that and restoration. But he could control the weather system in that room. He could make it rain. He could make it a foggy night. He just loved creating atmosphere, and his guests love that as well. One of the prize pieces of the castle would be his organ. And he constructed this organ himself, building it within the castle walls as well. He radiant heated them, so he was, as a scientist, he was sort of very much involved with radiant heat when it first started. And he heated the pipes in the walls to keep the music or the instrument in tune. So there are over 8,000 pipes for this organ in the walls of the castle. It was at one time the largest privately owned organ in the Western Hemisphere.
Well, it's amazing because, before I came to Gloucester, that, of course, was the name. That what I knew him, and many of anybody I talked with knew him for, is the Hammond organ. And that thing is just incredible, as is the entire castle. And what I like about visiting is there is this sense of history, there's this sense of art, but there's also a sense of modernity, as you mentioned. You could be comfortable there, and in fact, I guess a man's home is his castle in this case. But just on a tour of the museum itself, there's so much to see and understand. And then when you learn of who he really was and the things that he did, it's a must for anybody visiting this area.
It truly is. Hammond was a prolific inventor. He is probably the 6th largest patent holder in the United States, and many of his patents were involved with radio control. Actually, he was known as the father of radio control, guided missiles, bombs, submarines. He used to guide boats around the harbor remotely from shore, and there would be no one on them, and they would the fishermen would go a little crazy seeing.
Yeah, I taught a class on Cape Ann, and when I learned about that, there was some history back in the 40s, the 30s and 40s of fishermen who would come in and they didn't want to talk about the ghost boats in the harbor. And it turns out that was part of this experimentation.
Exactly. He loved that. So, but a very interesting man, brilliant man. And he wanted this place to be a museum from the day he built it, actually. He wanted to be able to share it with the community. And in 1930, he made it into a museum and would open the doors to his home, to the Gloucester community a day every month or so, and just let them come in and visit and to see the beauty of everything he had here. So when he died, he truly wanted this to continue as his legacy and as a museum.
And he did work with the government on a lot of stuff, secret stuff, as you mentioned, or at least that's what I read about.
Yeah.
Just an incredibly fascinating character in his own right. And I think that people have just got to learn about his legacy. But then you talk about the building itself. And when people visit the building, it's a little Gothic and intimidating when you first go in there. But then you see the eclectic rooms and artwork and everything else and the way it was set up. I haven't been there in probably 2 years now. You have a lot of displays about Hammond himself and how he worked, what he did, and what these pieces are in the castle. So it's a real timepiece. And maybe you could mention just a couple of things that are there in the castle that would be of interest to visitors.
Sure. Actually, we're working hard to become one of the largest STEM museums in the north of Boston area. Hammond, we have an inventions room which shows all of his patents. Some of them are on display, many of them are on display, I should say. A time chart telling you what he was interested in and what period of time. And then we also have downstairs an exhibit which we just opened this summer in what we call the War Room, and that has many displays and exhibits about his bombs and the things that he did for the government in the war. But it also has the most beautiful mural on the wall. Eric Pape, the artist who was in this area at the time Hammond was living, wanted to do something very special for the Hammonds, and he painted a mural on the walls of the War Room. And we've just recently had a benefactor restore this painting for us, and it's exquisite. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's a fictitious battle in Gloucester Harbor, as if we had been bombed during the war, and it shows missiles in the water and planes in the skies and boats blowing up, and it's really quite exciting and gorgeous. From what we have learned from a historian who specializes in paintings, is that this is probably one of the last existing murals of his creation. So,
well, I've got a reason to go back then. That's good. My two very favorite places are the Great Hall where the organ is, and also the pool, of course. I mean, it's fascinating. And he built the pool so that it had the effect of looking deeper than it was somehow, with some kind of visual effects. I mean, the guy was just amazing.
He was. He actually tinted the water green because he wanted it to look like it was a reflecting pool. But in fact, it's 8 feet deep. And he would, he had a favorite diving board, which was a sarcophagus that sits in the courtyard itself. And he'd perch himself on the top and just dive into the pool. And his guests would thinking he was plunging to his death. But for fact, he would just have a nice swim around and come out. And
Now, I visited the Sleeper McCann house, and was Sleeper and Hammond, did they know each other? Because I've heard of some fantastic parties and Halloween parties over at the Sleeper McCann house. But if I'm not misremembering, there have been some pretty spectacular parties at the Hammond Castle as well.
absolutely. I think they had dueling music at one time from home to home. They were very good friends. They were very, very close, and they were entertained here quite a bit. So they really had a special bond, actually. There were a group of gentlemen at that time that were very close, and Sleeper was one of them.
Yeah, and people should check that out too. The history of his exploits and so on, and the Sleeper McCann house in Gloucester. But
Yes.
back to now to the October. You had an event recently, and obviously things are really picking up at the Hammond Castle Museum. The advertising is more evident. You're doing different things at this time, and maybe a little bit about what just took place.
Sure. Actually, it was still happening.
Okay.
We were able to open in mid-July when the governor gave us permission for museums to be opened, and we went on a time ticketing system. So it's a reservation that you could easily make online to buy your ticket to come in. Now that we're on our October schedule, we're open from 10 to 3 Monday through Friday, and 10 to 4 on Saturdays and Sundays. And we give tours weekdays every hour, weekends every half hour. So we can keep everyone safe and socially distanced and follow the protocol for COVID in the state. But we wanted to add a little bit of something special. We'd always done the Wall of Darkness here for years and years. It was something that we had to really close the castle down for the entire month of October to do. It was very difficult to stage it, and it was giving wear and tear to the museum itself. So this year we decided with COVID, we wouldn't be able to have that event anyhow, but we decided to try something new. So my curator and my head tour guide picked up some H.P. Lovecraft stories and decided to adapt them to the castle and Hammond in his life. It's a fictitious story, but it's a little spooky, it's a little scary. And so we're having the horrors of Abida Maya.
I'm glad you pronounced it, because I wasn't even going to try. Okay.
And I've been working on it for the month, and I'm still stumbling on it. So sorry to say. No, it's Abadia Mara, and it's 5 stories that you travel from one end of the castle to the other, and it's timed. It's ticketed. There are only 8 people at a time allowed in each room because of the size of them. Some of our rooms are small, it's just a wonderful storyline, and there is a creature. The pool glows green for the creature who has been there and has now escaped. But it's a fun story, and people seem to be enjoying it very much. It's sold out, unfortunately. I wish I could add a dozen more performances, but time won't let us do that. And it is totally done by my tour staff. My tour director decided that she'd bring her people back in, and they're thrilled. It's very theatrical, and they're just, you would think they were professional actors and actresses. They're doing such a great job. So we're doing that. We're doing a trick or treat for children, which our guidelines on that under control is to keep everyone safe. Unfortunately, that wasn't up more than 24 hours, and it was completely sold out. I wish the calendar could stretch a little, and I had a few more days in the week that we could do a bit more. But we'll be open 7 days of the week. We have 2 more spiritualism tours on Thursday evenings, 7 p.m. and 8:30, and those tickets can be purchased online as well. And then come November and December, we're going to be open weekends, Friday, Saturday, and Sundays, again with time ticketing.
Oh, that's great. And I'll put up the link to the to your website as well, so people can get more
Thank you.
information and book it and so on. So you will be open. The idea is to be open through December.
The end of December, we're going to do deck the halls and try and bring a little merriment to the castle for Christmas.
That's great. That's great. And I know that there's so many different things, and it's so much fun going over there. And again, you also allow people to visit the grounds, even if they're not going to purchase a ticket and go inside. Is that right?
Yes, they can. The views that they have are really beautiful through the archways out to the ocean, and they can see the front of the castle. But if they have a ticket, they can walk all the way around the castle itself on the exterior, which is just going down to the ocean lawn and seeing the museum itself from a distance and just enjoying all of the beautiful towers and the catwalks and things. It's a lovely building, and the setting is perfect and very, very enjoyable.
I have probably two more questions, and one is involving staff. How has staff acclimated and or changed during the pandemic? Because you had one set of rules, obviously, before everything shut down. And I know that with respect to restaurants have lost a lot of staffing because of the way people have had to come back. How is it working at the castle?
Actually, it's worked well. I work very, very hard to keep my staff safe. We're all required to wear masks. We don't go anywhere without our mask being on. We have sanitation stations set up throughout the castle, so when you go from one room to another, you have an opportunity to sanitize your hands as well. We've been keeping it as clean as possibly we can. We have a company that comes in 3 times a week and sprays down everything in the building to sanitize it. And so my staff feels very secure and safe. We got a later start than we had hoped to, but everybody came right back on board, and they've been fantastic. We're working together to make this happen and to keep the castle open and growing. So
it's one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite places of all time. And I could go there as often as I would like to go to the Smithsonian Institution in DC. I think every time you go into the castle, you see something different, something that you might have missed before, and you remember some of the things that brought you there in the first place. And I highly recommend it. It's one of those things that you have to go to. But also, I think people have got to read up on John Hayes Hammond Jr. because the man was absolutely stupendously brilliant, and it's a product of, or he ended up being a product of Cape Ann. So it's really pretty cool. Do you know? Did he get? Did he hang around town at all? Did he do his shopping, his grocery shop, or anything like that in Gloucester? Do you have any idea about that?
I think his butler and his chauffeurs and his cooks all use local products and shop. So he had a staff, and but I'm sure he was seen around town all of the time. Actually, his dad was very much involved with the Stageboard Park, the plaque that is on the rock there. His father was involved in the installation of that, and the designer of that plaque was Eric Pate. Speaking of our mural and Eric, the artist. So there was a very close tie to the community and his friends here. Something I'd like to also mention, if you wouldn't mind, we're a great venue here for weddings and for corporate events and parties. We are sticking to the COVID rules, but we're still having petite weddings. We're doing things for corporate functions where we can do team building throughout the building. So we're trying to pivot and make our turns so that we can be here as a venue for as many events, weddings, birthday parties, anniversaries, and we're doing it. We're doing it safely, and it's been quite successful for us. So if you have listeners that are looking for a place to do something special, the castles could be available for you to do that too.
And hopefully next time I'll be able to actually tour the castle with my video camera, because you've given me a nice tour of your office, but that just doesn't do it.
I know, it doesn't do it. It is amazing, and I welcome you anytime you'd like to come by and take some photographs and shoot some video of it. It'll be our pleasure.